Hello, everyone, and welcome to this newest edition of Aeronautica. This is Remlace from 40k Theories.
And hi everyone, this is Fiaura. How's everybody doing?
And in today's edition, we're going to be taking a look at the aircraft of the Eldar. Now, I believe, Fiaura, you actually have a little bit of a disclaimer you want to get out of the way first.
Okay, I need to read off some disclaimers for you guys so you understand. It's also some clarifications. First off, an addendum to the previous episode. I put the F-14 Tomcat's payload weight, not its full combat weight, into the script. In my calculations in math, there's the full combat weight. The math is right. What I put in wording was wrong. My bad. Second, the way I approach all these vehicles is as follows. I need to see how well they can potentially fly, what they can do to maneuver or avoid, as well as avoid damage. Their armament is going to be my next step in determining what the flying vehicle is capable of. Lastly, I'm going to look at how well they can react to hits. I will also look at their utilities and how physically possible claims are around the maneuverability, weaponry, speed, and other capabilities of the vehicle versus those presented by statistics, stories, and descriptions of how they work. For each model, either I borrowed one from a Games Workshop store, because I have many Games Workshop stores friends who work at the stores, or I had to build a replica using 3D printed foam bodies and plastic plates. The objective, of course, to get the lift-to-drag ratio as accurate as possible. This episode and all future episodes will be done at the University of Delaware Department of Engineering. Unlike the Rutgers Department of Engineering, this is a shorter drive for me, and I have many more people in the area whom I know to get the models from. Also, there's like 3 students in the wind tunnel who know me personally. Or 3 students in the engineering department who have access to the wind tunnel, I should say, who know me personally. The aircraft, again, are either 3D printed models or using foam and plastic pieces that you can do for about $10, or they're actual tabletop models certified by Games Workshop. The objective to get the total drag at what would be considered their cruising speeds. Drag is equal to 0.5 times surface area of the direction of travel times density times the drag coefficient times velocity. I'm working to get the drag coefficients and then do all of that math. No, I am not allowed to record this, the wind tunnels, because they first off require that the camera be certified for the wind tunnel. Second, to use their camera equipment, because every hour of time in the wind tunnel, the lens of the camera has to be replaced, they charge $400. And I don't have that kind of cash. So while several of you did ask for video of the testing itself, I just can't afford to pay them $400 for the hour of time I'm in the wind tunnel. It only cost me about $60 an hour to use the wind tunnel, but it would cost $460 if I wanted footage as well. Understand
So
also...
naturally apologise about that, so...
Yeah, I don't have that kind of funding. Understand, I also may not be entirely accurate. I do check all of my calculations at least 4 times. I run the script by Remlace to make sure it makes sense. And I do everything I can to make this function. Remember, these are theories to take these vehicles from the lore base that we have the vehicles and bring them into our world to see if that we could actually build the real thing. So please, enjoy all of the science.
And with that out of the way, let's start off by taking a look at the Hemlock Wraith Fighter. Now, the Hemlock Wraith Fighter is, funnily enough, a terror weapon used by the Craftworlds. It contains a spirit core which acts as a miniature infinity circuit which can amplify the Spirit Seer's powers exponentially, but at the same time this also puts immense strain on the pilot as he's constantly bombarded with a whole bunch of whispering voices. The Hemlock itself also contains heavy D-siphs as its main weaponry mounted under each wing, which leave no blast and obvious damage or trail, but they tend to actually rip the souls from the target's bodies. They're originally intended to sever the Tyrant warriors linked to the hive mind, but the weapons are even capable of disrupting the engrams of Necron warriors.
Okay. For a start, this nightmare straight out of Five Nights at Freddy's can actually fly.
That's a good sign.
Unlike Space Marine aircraft, the Wraith Fighter has a lift-to-drag at the minimal speed needed to attain flight for its weight of 0.63, which is only 0.03 higher than an F-16 Interceptor. Taking this into account, I looked at this aircraft compared to the F-16, since it was the closest lift-to-drag between the two, and found a lot of similarities to them, both in how they're designed and how fast and capable they are. Though the Wraith Fighter does have a larger wingspan, which explains why it has a slightly higher lift-to-drag ratio, because its wingspan is actually larger than it needs to fly. That much said, it only requires 158.2 kilonewtons to fly at cruising speed and 151.2 kilonewtons to get off the ground. This is only about 14,000 more newtons of force, or 14 more kilonewtons of force, to get it off the ground in comparison to an F-16. Or roughly the bite strength of a human biting down hard enough to crack your own teeth. That's right, folks. If you bite hard enough, you can actually hurt your teeth. That's about the same force extra required to get this thing off the ground compared to an F-16. I'm not surprised by this, and the engineers were less laughing at the models I brought in this time. The armament, compared to a Space Marine aircraft or even a modern aircraft, the firepower on this one is nearly anemic. It's terrible. Yes, it can rip the souls from a person's body. Fair enough. That's a unique capability that I have to give it. But it only outside of that capability, it only has 2 guns, no bombs, and no missiles. Modern aircraft usually engage at ranges of up to 80 kilometers. Pilots never actually see each other's aircraft due to missile and radar technology, and even cannon ranges are estimated to fire at over 3 kilometers away from each other. Those dogfights you see in movies that are up close and personal and point blank don't really ever happen. Heavy D-sights have a range of 1,900 meters. This is using tabletop measurements from scale to scale it up to real life. That's all it's got outside of ripping souls. And the amount of strain placed upon the pilot, in addition to the G-forces being pulled by the aircraft, are likely to cause the pilot to pass out in a dogfight. Even an Eldar can't withstand the kind of forces that are going to be applied to them in this case. Armor-wise, this is like a modern aircraft. It won't take a hit. Even one of our Stinger air-to-air missiles would probably rip this thing's wing right off. But the good news is, it has maneuverability and speed to try to make up for this. Using its maximum speed, which we were able to simulate in the wind tunnel, it's apparently capable of going over Mach 4. Mach 4.77 is the estimated average speed we managed to come to a conclusion that it was capable of reaching. However, in combat, it should only be doing about Mach 1.4 and have a turning radius of roughly 5.89 kilometers at that full speed, doing 13.3 degrees per second, which is slightly worse than an F-15 Strike Eagle. So it is actually capable of dogfighting and flying faster than the speed of sound in atmosphere. Overall,
all in all, it's a pretty good start for the Eldar, I have to say.
I know, right? Overall, this is actually a good aircraft. It's kind of right there between the F-15 Strike Eagle and the F-16 Falcon as far as how good it actually is. However, it's probably only going to make that 180-degree turn at about just under the speed of sound. Roughly about 1,109 kilometers an hour, which is 175 kilometers an hour slower than the speed of sound. And that is because at that speed, turning as hard as it is, the Eldar pilot will have to compensate for experiencing 14.4 times normal gravity of the planet they're fighting over. Even with all the advanced technology in the world and enhanced biology of a human compared to an Eldar in relative terms, you're still going to be in extreme danger of blacking out without the stress of using the terror weapon and the soul stealing. With that stress, you're probably blacking out for a few seconds every time you pull a high G turn in this thing. But it flies, it can fight, its weapons kind of suck, and its armor's non-existent. But other than that, hey, it works!
Not a bad start, not the best in the world, but it's better than some of the Space Marine vehicles we've looked at so far in regards to actual, aerodynamics and being
Flying
more
brick.
aerodynamic. It's more aerodynamic than a brick wall, so that's what's got going for it. So next up, we're going to take a look at the Nightwing. Now, the Nightwing is a dogfighter. While its weaponry is capable of attacking ground targets, it tends to actually go specifically for other aircraft. In this end, it's armed with twin-linked, long-barreled shuriken cannons mounted in the nose, along with twin bright lancers mounted underneath the fuselage, giving it excellent firepower. In addition to this, it also contains banks of sophisticated systems which create a holographic field designed to hide it from the enemy. Not only does this field make it virtually impossible for enemy scanners and other devices to track the craft, but it also throws out distorting visual images to confuse enemy pilots.
Okay, I must clarify something. There are two versions of the Nightwing. I went with the version that has the folding wings and the smaller, and rather than the smaller fixed wing version. Because when I looked it up, there were two different model versions of the Nightwing, and I went with the one that has the wings that can fold back and move back out for combat purposes. To start with, also, I had to build a foam plastic model for this one. That under the wind tunnel conditions, when we cranked it up to the jet speed for 1 to 40 scale, the model disintegrated.
Wow.
The reason for the disintegrations, the wings are not properly spaced between the main body, front nose, and rear fixed wings in order to maintain jet speeds. This significantly increases the drag of the aircraft because there are points in the wings where the air will pool as it's passing over the wings between the two sets of main body and rear fixed wings that cause it to have to reinitiate moving those same air particles over again. This means its lift to drag isn't anywhere near a modern jet fighter, but rather an old prop plane. To be precise, it is almost identical in flight characteristics to a P-51 Mustang, which at really low speeds is extremely good. But which puts it at 0.294 lift to drag ratio at speeds equivalent to a prop aircraft, about 480 kilometers an hour. However, when we cranked it up to jet speeds, the lift to drag quickly rose to 3.1, and then the model flew apart into little pieces as we exceeded brick wall levels of lift to drag beyond belief. Once we hit 14 kilometer an hour, which for our scale purposes is 1400 kilometers an hour, this thing simply could not hold together. We actually took the model and put it back together, and then instead of glue, we actually used hardened medical staples to simulate rivets and nails to attempt the flight again. And once again, at 1188 effective kilometers an hour, scaled down by 40, which is 29.7 kilometers an hour, the model disintegrated.
Now, bear in mind, this craft is meant to reach speeds of around 3,600 kilometers.
In real physics and atmosphere, pure bollocks. It won't fly that fast, and this is strictly a sub-supersonic aircraft. Period. Another issue that we kind of had was saying it only weighs 5 tons. For an aircraft of its dimensions, using the lightest metal that we could possibly find on the periodic table that could be used to assemble an aircraft that could fly, it would still have to weigh at least 28.5 metric tons, using the dimensions provided and assuming the aircraft was hollow. This was
now, in fairness, Eldar aircraft are meant to be constructed from wraith bone rather than from metal.
In fairness, I will give you that. But in fairness, that's still a hell of a lot of wraith bone.
Oh, agreed.
Because we figured out this metric tonnage using 12 meters by 5.5 meters wide. That's the width of the body, not the wings. And a height of 2.6 meters, again, not including the tail or the fuselage wings, times the 7,265 kilograms per cubic meter of tin times 0.09 to account for the fact that most of the area would be completely hollow. And it still came out to almost 30 tons. Um, turning radius wise, it's turning at nearly 31.2 degrees a second at subsonic speeds, which means it's technically the fastest, hardest turning aircraft in this list. It is turning so hard that the Spitfire and P-51 Lightning could not outturn this aircraft, as it would only take 18 meters at its top sub-supersonic. Now, when I say sub-supersonic, the fastest speed we could get it to was 1,100 kilometers an hour. But at that speed, and when I say that, remember, guys, it's 1/40th scale, so we're actually only doing like 29 kilometers an hour as far as the wind blowing over it physically, but then we're scaling it up using math. But at that speed, it would only take 18 meters for this thing to do a 180.
Impressive.
In any other circumstance, in any other aircraft I know, you just killed the pilot. Because doing a 180 turn at that speed at 18 meters is over 33 Gs. You literally just liquefied somebody's brain doing that. So I don't know
how many Gs does it take to kill a human?
To get you to pass out, I believe the record is 16. Hold on, let me double check that. How many Gs kills you? No, I stand corrected. So negative Gs wise is you can withstand up to 47 negative Gs. But positive Gs, because of how blood works, it would all rush to your feet. You can only a human being passes out at 12.2 Gs on average and dies at 16.8. Like flat out, there will be no blood left in your brain, and you will die of oxygen asphyxiation at that rate.
So he's been killed twice over.
14 Gs can kill the average human. The most Gs ever withstood by a person, and they still blacked out, was 16.2, and they were forced to eject from the aircraft when they regained consciousness.
Now, in fairness, we don't know enough about the Eldar anatomy to know how many Gs it would take to kill them. But we're just working on human...
but I'm assuming 33.7 is too many.
Yeah. It probably would be a safe assumption, given their similar size and body type.
Weapons-wise, it has much better armament than the Hemlock. It still has a complete lack of missiles. But this feels more like because of its slower speed, it's not a dogfighter, it's a ground assault aircraft. This reminds me a lot more of an A-10 Warthog than an Interceptor. It sounds like it's made to drive around and kill tanks. Also, you're looking at a maximum effective weapon range, since the shuriken cannons it uses are actually smaller than the D-Scythe cannons, of only 1,240 meters. For aircraft dogfighting, that's point blank. Granted...
What about the pulse lasers, though? Or the Bright Lancers, my mistake.
The Bright Lances seem like they're a much heavier weapon, and therefore are actually designed for armor killing, not for air-to-air combat. But if you wanted to use them for air-to-air combat, you might get about 3-4 kilometers range out of them.
Considering how heavily armored that Space Marine aircraft was, I think they would be useful.
You're probably going to use them for that. Armor-wise, a hit in this thing is death. I believe that due to how thin the armor is, even a 50 caliber machine gun can penetrate it. That is, we discussed this in the armor episodes. It doesn't matter what it's made of. Armor too thin to withstand a hit will still break. You can have a solid 8 millimeters of reinforced titanium, but 8 millimeters is going to buckle under a 50 caliber machine gun round, period. 8 millimeters of depleted uranium will buckle under a 50 caliber machine gun round, because it's an equal and opposite reaction. Therefore, no matter how dense the metal is, it still has to be thick enough to withstand the impact of the round hitting it. And if it hits a surface area where the matter that it's being impacted upon is not the same mass or density as the bullet will still pass through and overwhelm it no matter what it's made of. In this case, 8 millimeters is not stopping anything. I would honestly be surprised if pistol rounds did not leave dents in this thing.
Particularly bolt pistol rounds.
Um, I had hoped for something a little better from the Eldar. We did some math and some reverse CAD engineering with this thing. If they looked at the wings on it and moved it back just under a meter, like further back on the aircraft towards its main center, it would actually be able to fly like a jet fighter perfectly fine.
But at least the Eldar are 2 for 2 when it comes to actually being able to fly.
That's true. At least they're 2 for 2 for being actually able to get off the ground.